The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, neatly worded, professionally cold. The Yale Political Union was inviting Karoline Leavitt, former White House press secretary and rising conservative voice, to speak at their annual campus forum on free speech in the modern era. The subject line was simple: confirmed speaker invitation. But beneath it, a storm was already brewing. Karoline sat in her Manhattan office, glancing over the email again. Confidently. "It's legit," her assistant confirmed, checking the domain. Assured, "You're in." But Karoline knew better. Yale had never been a friendly stage. She'd been protested before, at Harvard, at Columbia. This wouldn't be different. She could already see the headlines. Trump spokeswoman walks into Ivy League firestorm. And yet, she didn't hesitate. Determined. "I'm going," she said flatly, signing the acceptance form without another word. Within hours, the campus was in uproar. Twitter lit up. Instagram reels showed students burning mock invitations. Hashtags like #No platform for Karoline and Yale rejects. Hate trended nationwide. Jasmine Crockett, the progressive firebrand congresswoman and Yale law alum, reposted a student's viral TikTok and added her own scathing comment. Indignant. "This woman doesn't belong on that stage. Emphatic Yale should know better." The student paper picked it up in bold font. Boldly. "Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Assertive. This isn't her place." Karoline saw it all, and she saved every word. A week later, Yale administration issued a weak statement affirming a commitment to dialogue. But they were clearly panicked. Behind the scenes, pressure mounted. Donors called, professors argued, student organizations circulated petitions, and then Jasmine herself made a move that escalated everything. She announced she would be attending the forum in person. The message was clear. This wasn't just a student protest. It was a challenge. Karoline didn't flinch. On the night before her speech, she recorded a short clip for social media. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were fire. Calmly. "They said I don't belong. Determined. So I'll say it on that podium, not behind a screen." Challenging. "If truth offends you, show up. I'll be there." The video went viral overnight. Over 4 million views in 12 hours. Campus security tripled their presence. The event hall was packed beyond capacity. As Karoline arrived at Yale's campus the next day, she wore black, sharp, tailored, unyielding. Around her neck, a single silver cross rested just above her collarbone. Protesters screamed from behind barricades. Signs read, "Not welcome, fascist mouthpiece, this is our place." Karoline stepped past them without breaking stride. Inside, on the panel stage, Jasmine Crockett sat with arms crossed, already mic'd, already ready. The audience buzzed like a storm cloud waiting to strike. And Karoline Leavitt, undeterred, walked straight toward the podium. Karoline's heels echoed sharply across the marble floor as she entered Woolsey Hall, every step a silent rejection of the crowd's rage outside. Cameras clicked, phones filmed, the moderator's voice tried to rise above the tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats." But no one was really listening. All eyes were on the two women now facing each other under the harsh light of the Yale spotlight. Karoline Leavitt, battle-tested and composed. Jasmine Crockett, seated, arms folded, with a look that could cut steel. Karoline didn't acknowledge her, not yet. Instead, she walked calmly toward the podium. A staffer offered her a mic. She took it without a word, placed her notes on the wooden surface, then looked out across a sea of tense faces. Students, faculty, press, and now Jasmine Crockett, who was slowly rising from her seat. "I'd like to begin," Karoline said evenly. But Jasmine's voice sliced through the air before she could continue. "Excuse me," she said, stepping toward the podium. "Before we hand this stage over to a spokesperson for division, let's clarify one thing. This woman was invited without full approval of Yale's advisory board. This isn't her place. This school was built on the values of inclusion and truth, and she represents neither." The crowd erupted in mixed reactions. Cheers from one side, boos from the other. The moderator tried to interject. "Ms. Crockett, please," but she was already turning to Karoline. "You're not here for free speech," Jasmine continued, her tone sharp, performative. You're here for attention, for a platform to whitewash cruelty, defend a man who divided this country, and package it as patriotism. You don't belong on this stage, Karoline. You never did. Karoline stood still, her posture rigid, eyes narrowed but steady. She waited. Let the outrage rise. Let the room crackle with energy. Let the silence stretch just long enough for everyone to feel the weight of it. Then she leaned into the mic. "You're right about one thing," she said softly. "I didn't come here to be liked. I came here to speak. And the fact that you tried to stop me proves why I need to." A hush fell over the audience. "You see, Jasmine," Karoline continued, now turning directly toward her, "free speech isn't about comfort. It's about courage. And when someone's afraid of words, it usually means those words carry truth." She pulled a folded page from her binder and held it up. "This is the signed invitation from the Yale Political Union. You can question my presence all you want, but don't mistake disagreement for disqualification." Jasmine's smile was tight, her jaw clenched. Karoline took a breath and added, "You said this isn't my place. But maybe, just maybe, the fact that I'm standing here right now proves that it is." The crowd stirred. Students whispered. Phones recorded. And somewhere, a hand started clapping. It spread. Scattered applause turned into something louder. Not everyone joined in. But it was enough to shake the room. Jasmine looked out at the crowd, her expression stiffening. She wasn't finished, but neither was Karoline. Not by a long shot. And the podium now belonged to her. Karoline tightened her grip on the podium, but her voice remained even, firm, unwavering. "You know," she began, "before I came here I watched the videos, the protests, the hashtags, the statements from students claiming I represent hate, that my presence here is dangerous." She paused, letting the room sit with those words. Her eyes scanned the hall, finding faces that looked unsure, some angry, some intrigued. "Dangerous?" she said again, quieter this time, almost like she was mulling it over. "What's dangerous is the idea that only one kind of voice gets to be heard. What's dangerous is a generation afraid of argument, afraid of listening." The crowd murmured again, this time not with rage, but a crack of attention shifting. "I'm not here to force you to agree with me," she continued, lifting her chin slightly, "but I am here to remind you of something every American should know. Free speech isn't just for the popular opinion. It's not just for the majority or the loudest voice in the room. It's for everyone, including me." Behind her, Jasmine Crockett crossed her arms again and exhaled sharply. Karoline turned toward her briefly. "I get it. You don't like me. That's fine. But when you say I shouldn't be allowed to speak, when you say this isn't my place, you're not defending democracy. You're weakening it." That line hit. Audible gasps rose from the back rows, and Karoline pressed forward, feeding off the shift in energy. "I worked in the White House. I stood at that press podium and faced reporters who wanted me to break, to fold, to run. And I didn't. Because when you believe in something, you show up, especially when you're not welcome." More claps now. Not thunderous, but real. Jasmine stood slowly, speaking up from behind her. "You want to pretend you're a victim," she said, voice low but loaded. "But you had every opportunity handed to you. You used power to silence others, and now you want sympathy?" Karoline turned, sharp but composed. "I don't want your sympathy. I want your ears. You don't have to agree with me, but you don't get to cancel me because it's convenient." She turned back to the crowd. "This generation talks a lot about safe spaces. Let me say something hard. America is not a safe space. It's a battleground of ideas. And when we shield ourselves from discomfort, we lose the tools we need to lead." Applause broke out again, larger this time, a ripple that surprised even the organizers. One professor in the third row nodded. A student in a Yale sweatshirt filmed the moment and posted it with the caption, "Didn't expect to clap for Karoline Leavitt tonight, but damn." Jasmine Crockett remained silent now, her jaw tight, her hands clasped together. She wasn't out, but Karoline had seized momentum, and it was only the beginning. The moderator tried to regain control. Let's keep this respectful, he said, almost pleading. But the tension between the two women had transformed the stage into a live wire, one spark away from another explosion. Jasmine Crockett didn't wait for a cue. She stepped toward the second microphone, her eyes locked on Karoline. "You want to talk about courage?" she asked, her tone icy. "You served under a man who encouraged division, attacked the media, separated families at the border, and made truth negotiable. And now you walk into an Ivy League forum and play the martyr? You don't get to redefine courage to clean up someone else's mess." A mix of gasps and cheers echoed across the hall. Several students stood, clapping loudly for Jasmine. The battle had shifted again, and Jasmine wasn't holding back. "You say free speech is for everyone," she continued, eyes sharp. "But where was your voice when journalists were silenced? When peaceful protests were crushed? When immigrants were demonized from the podium you used to defend?" Karoline listened silently, arms crossed now, letting Jasmine unload. "You're not here to uplift truth," Jasmine went on. "You're here to rewrite history, and you think a silver cross and a sharp suit give you moral authority. They don't. This stage doesn't make you right." Karoline stepped forward again, unfazed. "You say I represent division, but you're standing here trying to silence me before I even finish a sentence. That's not inclusion. That's intimidation." Jasmine interrupted. "You're not silenced. You're standing at a podium with a microphone. You were invited to a school that people like me had to fight to be accepted into. Don't you dare pretend you're the outsider." Karoline didn't blink. She turned to the audience again, her voice steady. "This is what happens when disagreement is treated like threat. Jasmine wants you to believe I don't belong because I worked for a president she despises. But I'm not here to debate Trump. I'm here to defend the idea that everyone, even people you hate, deserve to be heard." Silence fell again. "You think my presence here erases your fight?" Karoline said, looking back at Jasmine. "It doesn't. But if your fight demands I be silent, maybe it's not the kind of justice you think it is." Jasmine clenched her jaw, stepping back slightly. The audience was split, some energized by her passion, others visibly moved by Karoline's defiance. The moderators looked helpless. And somewhere backstage, a Yale administrator whispered, "We lost control of this." But in the crowd, something else was happening. Students who came to boo were now glued to the exchange, not because they agreed, but because they were finally hearing something raw, unsanitized, unscripted. Two women, two sides, clashing not in tweets, but face to face. And this wasn't ending anytime soon. A hush settled over Woolsey Hall. Even the sound of shuffling feet had faded, replaced by something heavier. Attention. Real, unfiltered attention. What started as a protest and a confrontation had become something else. Something none of them expected. Karoline took one small step forward. Not toward the podium this time, but toward Jasmine. "I didn't come here to erase anyone's struggle," she said, voice lower now, but somehow more cutting. "I came here to talk about where we're going wrong. We've turned every disagreement into a character assassination, every debate into a declaration of war. You hate what I stand for? Fine, challenge my ideas, but don't block the door before I can walk in." A professor in the audience murmured, "She's not wrong." A few heads turned. Karoline glanced at the students. "Let me ask you all something," she continued. "Do you really want to live in a country where the only people allowed to speak are the ones everyone already agrees with?" No one answered, but no one left. "I represent people who feel silenced in classrooms, mocked online, called names for daring to think differently. And I'm telling you now, they're watching, they're listening, and they're tired of being told that respect only flows one way." Jasmine finally stepped forward again, her voice sharper than ever. "You talk about respect. Where was your respect when your boss labeled black women nasty? When he dismissed entire communities with dog whistles you didn't call out?" Karoline didn't flinch. "You want me to defend every word he ever said?" she asked. "I won't, because I'm not here as his mouthpiece. I'm here as me, Karoline Leavitt." And the day we lose the ability to separate individuals from their affiliations is the day free thought dies. That line cut deeper than either side expected. A student in the front row, who had earlier held a cardboard sign reading "No space for hate," lowered it slightly. Another typed on their phone, quietly posting, "Didn't think I'd be nodding along with Karoline Leavitt, but here we are." Jasmine crossed her arms. "It's easy for you to speak calmly. You were never the one being profiled, policed, or pushed out." Karoline replied, "And it's easy for you to dismiss me because I'm not from your struggle. But that's the trap. We're not listening anymore. We're ranking pain like it's currency. We don't build bridges by keeping score. We build them by showing up." The audience held its breath, and then, from somewhere in the back, a young woman stood up. "I don't agree with either of you on everything," she said nervously. "But this is what we need. Not silence, not safe words. Just real talk." Applause followed. Then more. Hesitant, but growing. Not for a side, but for the confrontation itself. For the rawness of what was happening. Jasmine looked over at Karoline again, her stance softening by degrees. Just a flicker. But Karoline caught it. The air in Woolsey Hall had shifted. The applause continued. Not thunderous, but rhythmic and honest. It wasn't about politics anymore. It was about the power of two women refusing to back down, refusing to be boxed in by party lines or stereotypes. And somewhere in that tension, something started to break open. Karoline looked out at the crowd, her eyes softer now. "You know, I didn't expect a warm welcome," she said. "But I didn't come here for that. I came here because I believe something is still worth saving. The ability to talk, to push back, to disagree without being destroyed." A murmur of agreement ran through the audience. Then she pointed gently toward Jasmine. "We don't have to like each other. We don't have to agree. But I'll tell you what, we're both here. We both showed up. And that should mean something." Jasmine exhaled slowly. For the first time, she didn't interrupt. She didn't glare. She simply listened. Then, without fanfare, she walked to the same podium Karoline had used moments earlier. "I don't agree with much of what you've said," Jasmine began. "But you're right about one thing. We've forgotten how to listen." Gasps whispered through the room. A few students leaned forward in their chairs. "We've made the debate stage a battlefield," she continued, "when it should be a bridge. I still think you defended policies that hurt people like me, but I respect that you came here anyway." Karoline nodded once. A small gesture, but a heavy one. Jasmine turned to the audience. "You don't have to choose sides tonight. That's not what this is about. The real question is, are we brave enough to keep doing this? Not yelling on social media, not canceling from behind a screen, but standing here, facing each other." The room broke into applause again, this time from both camps. Students who had come to protest were now standing. Others clapped reluctantly, but they clapped. Professors exchanged glances. Phones lit up with tweets, posts, and clips already going viral. Karoline and Jasmine, Yale debate turns into something none of us saw coming. From confrontation to clarity, this is what we need more of. Karoline stepped forward again, her voice calm. "You stood your ground, Jasmine, and I respect that. If I'm being honest, I expected you to try and shut me down like so many others have." Jasmine shrugged. "I thought I would too, but maybe this time, something different needed to happen." For a moment it was quiet again. Not from tension, but from something close to understanding. Karoline extended a hand, not for a performance, not for applause, but because she meant it. Jasmine looked at it. The room held its breath. And then, slowly, she took it. The moment Jasmine Crockett's hand met Karoline Leavitt's, a wave of camera flashes lit up the auditorium like a lightning storm. It wasn't rehearsed, it wasn't safe, it was real. And in an age of sound bites and spin, realness was rare enough to feel revolutionary. The audience rose in what could only be described as stunned applause. Not unanimous, but widespread. Not for a winner or loser, but for the gesture. For two women who stood on opposite ends of the ideological spectrum, refusing to retreat into echo chambers. Karoline leaned slightly closer, not into the mic, but to Jasmine directly. "You didn't have to take that hand," she said quietly. "But you did." Jasmine nodded once. "Because someone had to go first. Might as well be us." The moderator, who had spent the last hour trying and mostly failing to maintain order, stepped back into view, this time with a look of disbelief and cautious optimism. I don't know what just happened," he said into the mic, "but I think we all felt it." He turned to the audience. This was supposed to be a debate. It became something more. Cameras from student media and national outlets swiveled toward the stage. The headlines were already forming. Yale clash turns corner, Leavitt and Crockett shake hands in stunning moment. Red and blue find gray area. A viral exchange between opponents sparks new conversation. Backstage, the Yale event coordinator frantically answered texts and emails from administrators and media outlets. One read, "Is this going to make us look bad or brilliant?" Another replied instantly, "Both. That's what makes it historic." On social media, clips of the handshake exploded. "I came to protest Karoline. I left respecting her and Jasmine. Didn't see that coming." Real courage isn't yelling. It's shaking the hand of someone who challenged you. Karoline turned back to the audience, her expression serious but open. "I'm not asking anyone to agree with me," she said. "All I'm asking is that we stop throwing stones at people the second they say something different." Jasmine stepped beside her. "And I'm not here to pretend there's no damage to repair. There is. But we don't fix anything by screaming across a chasm. We fix it by showing up, like this." Together they stood, neither surrendering their beliefs, but neither retreating from the moment either. The students, some still wiping away tears of frustration or hope or confusion, began chanting something unexpected. "Do it again! Do it again!" Karoline smiled, shaking her head. "Maybe not tomorrow," she said, "but soon. And not just us." Jasmine added, "All of you, you're next. Your turn to stand in a room like this and stay in it." And with that, the energy shifted once more, not into applause, but into thought. Within an hour of the handshake, the footage had exploded across platforms. TikTok edits of the moment were paired with dramatic music. X, formerly Twitter, lit up with takes from every side, and mainstream media scrambled to frame it. But not all reactions were positive. On the far left, hashtags like "don't normalize," "her," and "platforming bigotry" trended rapidly. One post read, "Jasmine just handed Karoline a PR victory. You don't shake hands with someone who supports oppression." A progressive podcast released an emergency episode titled "Capitulation at Yale," criticizing the gesture as a betrayal of progressive values. Meanwhile, the right hailed Karoline as a principled warrior who broke the liberal blockade. One Fox News commentator grinned on air. "Karoline Leavitt just walked into the lion's den and came out with the lion's paw." That's historic. But Karoline didn't see it that way. Back in her hotel room, she sat cross-legged on the bed, watching the replay silently. She wasn't smiling. Her aide, Thomas, entered with his phone buzzing. "Fox wants you on tonight. Hannity, also Newsmax, Daily Wire podcast, and a few others. They're calling it a win." Karoline shook her head. "I don't want this to be twisted into some team victory," she said. "That's not what it was." Thomas blinked. "Then what was it?" Karoline looked up. "A moment, an opening. And we're going to lose it if everyone tries to weaponize it." Elsewhere, Jasmine sat on her dorm room floor, surrounded by texts from supporters and detractors alike. "I can't believe you gave her that stage. You did what nobody else had the guts to. You let her humanize herself, and it's dangerous." Jasmine stared at her phone for a moment before tossing it on the bed. Her roommate, Aaliyah, sat across from her, arms crossed. "Would you do it again?" Aaliyah asked. Jasmine thought about it. "Yeah," she said quietly. "Because sometimes the fight isn't about shutting the other side down. Sometimes it's about proving you're strong enough to hear them and still stand firm." The next morning, Yale's student paper featured a front-page editorial titled "The Debate That Became a Door." Professors praised the unexpected civility. Students argued in dining halls, but with new curiosity. A campus poll revealed something even more surprising. 62% of students said the event made them more willing to listen to someone with opposing views. Karoline read the number twice. "This is what matters," she told Thomas. "Not who won, but what moved." He looked at her. "So, what's next?" Karoline answered without hesitation. "We show them it wasn't a fluke." Within an hour of the handshake, the footage had exploded across platforms. TikTok edits of the moment were paired with dramatic music. X, formerly Twitter, lit up with takes from every side, and mainstream media scrambled to frame it. But not all reactions were positive. On the far left, hashtags like "Don't Normalize," "Her and Tish platforming bigotry" trended rapidly. One post read, "Jasmine just handed Karoline a PR victory. You don't shake hands with someone who supports oppression." A progressive podcast released an emergency episode titled "Capitulation at Yale," criticizing the gesture as a betrayal of progressive values. Meanwhile, the right hailed Karoline as a principled warrior who broke the liberal blockade. One Fox News commentator grinned on air. "Karoline Leavitt just walked into the lion's den and came out with the lion's paw." That's historic. But Karoline didn't see it that way. Back in her hotel room, she sat cross-legged on the bed, watching the replay silently. She wasn't smiling. Her aide, Thomas, entered with his phone buzzing. "Fox wants you on tonight. Hannity. Also Newsmax, Daily Wire podcast, and a few others. They're calling it a win." Karoline shook her head. "I don't want this to be twisted into some team victory," she said. "That's not what it was." Thomas blinked. "Then what was it?" Karoline looked up. "A moment. An opening. And we're going to lose it if everyone tries to weaponize it." Elsewhere, Jasmine sat on her dorm room floor, surrounded by texts from supporters and detractors alike. "I can't believe you gave her that stage. You did what nobody else had the guts to. You let her humanize herself, and it's dangerous." Jasmine stared at her phone for a moment before tossing it on the bed. Her roommate, Aaliyah, sat across from her, arms crossed. "Would you do it again?" Aaliyah asked. Jasmine thought about it. "Yeah," she said quietly, "because sometimes the fight isn't about shutting the other side down. Sometimes it's about proving you're strong enough to hear them and still stand firm." The next morning, Yale's student paper featured a front-page editorial titled "The Debate That Became a Door." Professors praised the unexpected civility. Students argued in dining halls, but with new curiosity. A campus poll revealed something even more surprising. 62% of students said the event made them more willing to listen to someone with opposing views. Karoline read the number twice. "This is what matters," she told Thomas. "Not who won, but what moved." He looked at her. "So, what's next?" Karoline answered without hesitation. "We show them it wasn't a fluke." 2 weeks later, footage from Yale's roundtable, filmed unofficially by a student with a shaky hand and a steady conviction, leaked online. No edits, no captions. Just two women, speaking, listening, disagreeing without destruction. It spread like wildfire. Clips flooded social media platforms, not as partisan ammunition, but as conversation starters. Hashtags like "Nalbash," "Talk Like Yale," and "Ma Cross the Aisle Challenge" trended for days. Students from other universities, Harvard, Berkeley, Liberty, Howard, began tagging their student governments, demanding their own roundtables. If Jasmine Crockett and Karoline Leavitt can do it, why can't we? Even high school civics classes started replaying the handshake, the roundtable, and the words that followed, not as political doctrine, but as civic possibility. A CNN anchor said it plainly. It wasn't just about who spoke louder. It was about who stayed in the room when the yelling stopped. Back in D.C., Karoline sat with her team, watching the numbers climb. Thomas walked in holding his phone. "You're being asked to keynote at Georgetown next month, and Columbia, and even, wait for it, Berkeley." Karoline raised an eyebrow. "Berkeley? Apparently they want real talk, not just party lines." She leaned back in her chair, a slow smile forming. "Guess the fire we lit at Yale is spreading." Across the country, Jasmine Crockett faced the same reaction. Her office received hundreds of handwritten letters from young Democrats, community leaders, even Republican voters. You didn't cave, you led. You made me rethink what strength looks like. Thank you for staying in the room. In a rare moment of bipartisan agreement, both women were nominated by their respective parties to co-chair a new initiative, Voices Across America, a project aimed at fostering dialogue on campuses without sacrificing conviction. At the launch press conference, reporters swarmed the podium. One asked Karoline, "Do you still believe this was never your place?" She glanced at Jasmine, then turned back to the cameras. "No," she said with calm certainty. "I know now. It was always mine. I just had to walk into it." Jasmine stepped beside her. And sometimes the most radical thing you can do in politics is listen. They shook hands again. This time not as a surprise, but as a signal. That staying, speaking, and seeing each other wasn't weakness. It was the new frontier. And the podium? It wasn't just a place to speak. It was a place to rebuild something far bigger. A country. In a world increasingly divided by noise, rage, and silence, two women did something different. They showed up. One was told, "This isn't your place." The other was warned, "Don't give her a platform." But together, they rewrote the rules. Karoline Leavitt didn't storm the podium in anger. She walked to it with purpose. Jasmine Crockett didn't surrender her values. She defended them with grace. And in doing so, they proved that conviction doesn't have to cancel conversation. And that courage sometimes means listening as much as speaking. What started as a standoff became a signal, a handshake, a challenge, a new kind of leadership. This story isn't about who won a debate. It's about what happens when people refuse to be boxed in by expectations and instead rise beyond them. So the next time someone tells you, "This isn't your place," remember Karoline. Walk forward anyway, because history isn't made by those who stay seated. It's made by those who stand, speak, and stay.